somewhere between coincidence and design, you found this moment, not by accident, but because your own frequency has been quietly drawing it toward you. Take a deep breath, let the noise of the day soften, and allow yourself to settle here for a while. If you're listening in the late hours or somewhere between journeys, let this be your still point. Subscribe so we can meet again, wherever your path bends next. Now imagine your life not as something that happens to you, but as something happening through you. Every thought, every feeling, every quiet longing is a vibration shaping the very reality you walk through. You don't attract what you want, you resonate with what you are. In the unseen architecture of the universe, your inner state is the blueprint for the outer world. Ancient wisdom, quantum possibility, and the soft language of intuition are always whispering if you know how to listen. Tonight, we'll step gently into that space between awareness and becoming, where reality doesn't just respond to you, it remembers you. You didn't arrive here by scrolling or chance, not really. The world you see through your eyes is only a fraction of what you're participating in. Long before you became aware of this moment, something within you was already listening, already responding not with words, but with a vibration, a frequency uniquely yours. In a universe saturated with motion and noise, algorithms and intention, something far more ancient was guiding you here, not as a coincidence, but as a convergence. The truth is that awareness does not bloom from logic. It opens like a field, touched by a forgotten wind, stirring in patterns too subtle to measure, but too precise to ignore. This is not just a message. It is not content. It is a mirror, a signal from the geometry of existence itself, humming back to you through the illusion of language, asking the only question that matters. Are you ready to remember what you already are? And if so, what will you become once you stop pretending otherwise? We often think of ourselves as separate from what surrounds us, as if reality is a show we've been invited to watch, clap for, or perhaps critique. But this separation is an illusion taught by centuries of forgetting. You are not the observer. You are the equation, the ink, the axis of the wheel, and the rotation itself. Reality doesn't happen around you. It happens as you. You are not a character waiting to be written into meaning. You are the scriptwriter, the breath in the actor's lungs, the stage beneath every transformation. Everything that has ever happened in your life, every heartbreak, every whisper of intuition, every strange coincidence that made you pause for half a second, was not random. It was part of your echo, the feedback loop between your essence and the field. There is part of you that has never been confused. It does not live in your thoughts or titles or timelines. It lives in the hum beneath your memories, the hum that shaped your first breath and will stay long after your last. Let's begin to shift what that means. Imagine your life as a tuning fork, vibrating in a hall of infinite mirrors. Every emotion, every thought, every doubt or breakthrough is a frequency, a resonance sent out into the larger matrix of being. The universe does not respond to words or pleas or strategies. It responds to coherence, to the harmony of our inner state. And here lies one of the most liberating truths. You do not attract what you want. You attract what you are, not as judgment, not as reward, but as law. Like calls to like, resonance builds reality. And most of us have spent decades trying to change the outside while never adjusting the music inside. This is the shift. The revolution isn't external, it's vibrational. The world reshapes around the frequency you embody, not the performance you perfect. And that shift begins the moment you choose to live from the center instead of the surface. But let's go deeper. This isn't just poetic philosophy. It is the invisible mechanics behind everything you've ever called coincidence. That stranger who said exactly what you needed to hear. That job you didn't get that turned out to be protection in disguise. That feeling in your stomach that made no logical sense, but turned out to be prophecy. These are not accidents. They are echoes of your own field, responding in real time to the signature of your awareness. The strange part? The more you listen, the more it speaks. The more you attune to the quiet hum underneath your striving, the more the universe leans in. Because the universe doesn't reward effort. It amplifies alignment. You don't have to push as much as you think. You have to tune. And tuning happens not in the mind, but in the coherence of thought, feeling, and embodied presence pointing in the same direction. That is the soft revolution, the recalibration that makes the invisible visible. And what about time? We've been taught to treat it like a straight road, a conveyor belt, delivering us from youth to age, from potential to regret. But time is not linear to the field. It is layered. It is simultaneous. Your future self, the one who has healed, who has integrated, who has remembered, is already present, whispering backwards. Those flashes of knowing, those urges that feel older than you, those dreamlike moments when you feel yourself becoming something you haven't quite lived yet, those are not fantasies. They are entanglements. You are already in contact with a version of you that exists beyond your doubt, the one who lives beyond survival. That version is not waiting for you to earn your way there. It's waiting for you to recognize that the path was always an inward spiral, not an outward climb. You are not becoming. You are unlayering. The destination is not ahead. It is within, quietly humming at the frequency of your remembering. And yet, we resist. Of course we do, because the world rewards struggle. We've been taught that worth must be proven, love must be earned, and rest must be justified. We live in a system that monetizes insecurity and turns our sacred intuition into background noise. But the deeper truth is this: your being is already enough. You were not made to chase worthiness. You were made to express it. The moment you stop performing for approval and start aligning with your original essence, the distortion begins to dissolve. You stop needing permission. You stop outsourcing your authority. And the world begins, subtly and unmistakably, to respond differently, not as spectacle, not as miracle, but as coherence. You wake up one morning and notice that the things you once begged for are now arriving quietly, not because you worked harder, but because you tuned differently. The field was never against you. It was waiting for resonance. Still, the process is not always loud. In fact, most of it is invisible. There are seasons of awakening when truths crash in like lightning, when everything shifts overnight. But there are also seasons of silence, seasons where nothing seems to be happening, where the world feels paused, muted, undecided. These are the sacred winters, the underground growing seasons, where roots deepen, where identity composts, where patience becomes prophecy. Do not rush them. Do not confuse quiet with absence. In the field, stillness is not stagnation. It is recalibration. Just as trees must surrender their leaves to deepen their roots, we too must sometimes lose what we thought defined us in order to remember what actually sustains us. Let the silence speak. Let it burn away the performance. Let it remind you that you are already in the process of becoming, even when becoming looks like nothing at all. And through it all, the most underrated guide is your own intuition, not a hunch, not a superstition, but the native language of the quantum field translated through your nervous system. That tightening in your chest, that pull toward a path you can't explain, that unshakable sense that something is either right or not. These are not random sensations. They are your compass, your tuning fork. The more you trust them, the more accurate they become, because intuition is not magic. It is coherence felt through the body. And when your intuition becomes louder than your conditioning, you begin to move in rhythm with a reality that feels strangely designed for you. Not because the world suddenly changes, but because you have. You are not reacting. You are harmonizing. You are participating in the shaping of your world by daring to believe that your own sensing is sacred. Now pause, not to analyze, but to feel. Let your breath soften. Let your chest loosen. Let your attention drop into that quiet space below the noise. You are not imagining your way into a new life. You are remembering the signal you've always been sending. And as we continue, hold this not as concept, but as sensation. The hum beneath your thoughts, the field around your form, the whisper of your future self already guiding you home. What if the story you've been living wasn't wrong, but incomplete? What if every decision, every detour, every delay was not a mistake, but part of an invisible spiral unfolding from within you? We've been conditioned to see progress as straight lines and achievement as outward proof. But growth, real growth, is rarely a spectacle. It's an unglamorous internal rearrangement, a soft rewiring of how we relate to reality. And that begins when we understand this simple truth. Life is not happening to us. It's happening through us. You are not a fixed identity observing change. You are change observing itself. You are a pattern in motion. And the more you resist your natural evolution, the more distorted the reflection becomes. But the moment you begin to flow not blindly, but intuitively with what is truly yours, life stops resisting you back. Because the universe is not testing you, it's echoing you. And every echo asks one question in 1,000 voices. Are you listening yet? Let's take a deeper step into this. Think of your consciousness not as a thing you possess, but as a frequency you tune. The higher the coherence between your thoughts, emotions, actions, and subtle desires, the clearer the signal you send into the quantum field. This is not mysticism, it is soft physics. Coherence isn't perfection, it's agreement. It's when the many fragmented aspects of your being begin pointing in the same direction. And when they do, you become legible to reality. Possibilities that once seemed locked behind chance or effort begin to trickle into your life, not because the rules changed, but because your vibration did. The people who used to trigger, you start feeling irrelevant. The dreams that used to feel distant begin arriving in forms you didn't expect. This is not because you forced your way forward, but because you softened into alignment. The world you see around you is not neutral. It is reactive, and your vibration is its sculptor. But here's the paradox. To become coherent, you must face incoherence, the buried stories, the inherited shame, the internalized pressure to prove, to hurry, to compete. These aren't flaws, they're interference. And when left unacknowledged, they jam the signal. Not because they're bad, but because they aren't you. Every false belief about your worth, your timeline, your lovability was learned. And anything learned can be unlearned. The hard part is that these distortions often masquerade as safety. We cling to them not because they serve us, but because they're familiar. Letting go feels like risk, when in truth, it's relief. You are not here to heal every wound before you live fully. You are here to stop identifying as the wound. Healing is not a prerequisite for embodiment. It is a consequence of it. The more you live as the frequency you truly are, the more the old stories dissolve in the resonance of your becoming. Even language can betray us. The word manifestation has become heavy with performance vision boards, timelines, checklists, demands wrapped in desire. But the deeper reality is that the field doesn't care about your scripts. It responds to your state. Manifestation isn't about getting what you want. It's about becoming the version of you who already lives in that reality. When that happens, the need to chase vanishes. You don't need to impress life. You need to match it. Imagine walking into a room full of tuning forks. If you strike one tune to a particular note, the others that match its frequency will begin to vibrate without being touched. That's resonance. That's how the field works. You don't need to pull your desires toward you. You need to become the resonance that makes them move on their own. This is why rest is sacred. Not because it's a reward, but because it's a recalibration. We are a culture addicted to striving, addicted to the illusion that more effort equals more worth. But your deepest transformation happens when you stop performing, when you pause, when you let the noise drain and the internal compass regain its true north. The truth is, the world will always tell you that you're behind, that there's more to do, more to fix, more to prove. But the field doesn't operate on urgency. It operates on vibration. And urgency is a frequency of fear. The moment you choose rest, not as avoidance, but as trust, you become coherent with a deeper rhythm. And that rhythm is always drawing the future you toward now. Not with speed, but with precision. Now let's talk about intuition again. Not as a whisper, but as a language. It's the field's way of communicating through your nervous system. When your stomach tightens before a decision, when your chest expands in someone's presence, when you feel an unspoken yes or no without any logic, that is not weakness. That is transmission. Your body is a receiver, a sensor, a translator. The more you listen to it, the clearer the signal. But most of us were taught to doubt that knowing, to overrule it with logic, to silence it with shoulds. So it gets quieter, until it speaks only in the language of discomfort, tension, fatigue, apathy. But when you begin honoring it, it blooms. Intuition doesn't always lead to easy outcomes, but it always leads to aligned ones. And alignment, over time, brings peace that effort could never buy. This is also why relationships shift when you begin tuning your field. Not because others are wrong or broken, but because you are changing the frequency you once shared with them. You're no longer resonating with chaos or scarcity or control. And so those relationships either recalibrate or release. It can be painful, but it's also liberating, because each connection is a chord, a shared vibration. And when your internal song changes, the orchestra of your life must shift. This isn't rejection. It's resonance in motion. And the people who stay who attune with your becoming will feel like coming home. Not because they complete you, but because they amplify your coherence. They mirror the music you finally remembered how to play. So much of awakening is not about addition, it's about subtraction. It's peeling away the layers of identity you thought you needed to be loved, to be safe, to be chosen. But love that demands performance is not love. Safety that demands shrinking is not safety. And worth that needs proof is not worth. It's a prison. You are not here to earn the right to be whole. You are here to live as if you always were. Because you were. The forgetting was part of the design. The return is the gift. And every step you take toward coherence, no matter how small, sends a signal. The field is listening, not to your effort, but to your essence. And when it hears the real you, it begins to respond in kind. So ask yourself softly, what am I vibrating? Right now? What story is humming beneath my actions? What belief is shaping the world I call reality? These questions aren't meant to be solved like puzzles. They're meant to tune your awareness, to shift you from reaction into resonance. Because when you begin to live from this place, when you stop trying to become and start embodying you, stop being ruled by the external. You move from performance to presence, from chasing to channeling. And in that space, the miraculous becomes mundane, not because it's less magical, but because it's finally natural. There is more, always more. But for now, let this be enough. Let the strange familiarity of these words remind you that nothing in you is broken, nothing is missing. You are not late, you are not behind. You are in perfect resonance with the remembering that brought you here, and the path ahead is not a race. It's a rhythm, one that has always been waiting for you to hear its call dot as your coherence deepens. Something remarkable begins to unfold, not outwardly at first, but in the fabric of your perception. The world starts feeling less like an obstacle course and more like a dialogue. You no longer ask, "Why is this happening to me?" but rather, "What is this mirroring in me?" And slowly, subtly, the script changes. What once triggered you now teaches you. What once drained you now reveals your own boundaries. You realize that nothing is neutral, everything is a message. Not as punishment or reward, but as communication. The field is not random, it is responsive. And once you understand that you're in conversation with your own vibration, life becomes something softer. Not easier, but more understandable. Even the ache begins to feel like part of a design you no longer need to control. You become fluent in your own becoming. This is when your memories shift too, not in content, but in texture. You look back on the moments you thought had broken you and see that they carved new space instead. Space for softness, for discernment, for unshakable knowing. The heartbreak wasn't exile, it was excavation. The confusion wasn't chaos, it was compost. You weren't being punished, you were being unlayered. Every loss you thought was abandonment now reveals itself as divine calibration. A rearrangement, not of circumstances, but of identity. You were not being reduced, you were being made ready. The delays, the rejections, the silent seasons, each one a teacher in disguise, guiding you back to the frequency that was always yours, but long, buried beneath performance, fear, and noise. You are not a victim of your timeline. You are the architect of its unfolding. Let's return to the body, your most underappreciated oracle. This form you wear is not an inconvenience to transcend. It is the most immediate portal to presence. Every cell listens. Every muscle stores memory. Every nerve speaks the language of your beliefs. When your shoulders tighten, when your gut clenches, when your breath shortens, your body isn't malfunctioning. It's messaging. It's asking you to tune in, not override. And when you begin treating your body not as a machine to manage, but as a sacred instrument to harmonize, everything changes. Your intuition sharpens. Your anxiety softens. Your fatigue begins to whisper instead of scream. Because the body never lies, it only reflects what the mind is trying to ignore. And when body, mind, and heart begin to sing in unison, that's coherence. That's the song the universe has always been waiting to hear from you. In this space that the idea of being chosen transforms. You stop asking, "Am I worthy?" and begin asking, "Am I aligned?" Because chosen isn't a title, it's a choice. The field does not pick favorites, it responds to frequency. And frequency is a result of coherence. Are you willing to live as if you are chosen? That's the question that unlocks it all, because that willingness rearranges everything. Not in theory, but in chemistry. Your cells begin to respond differently. Your nervous system relaxes. Your thoughts soften. The version of you that once needed proof starts becoming the proof. And then life slowly at first, and unmistakably begins to echo that back. Sometimes the shift is quiet. You wake up and realize that anxiety you carried for years has lost its grip. That urgency you thought was your fuel now feels foreign. That version of you that needed constant validation now craves stillness instead. These aren't surface changes. They're tectonic. They indicate a deeper resonance, a new alignment with a reality you didn't even know you were allowed to. Live, one where effort becomes offering. One where doing flows from being. One where you're no longer chasing transformation, but embodying it. And so your world transforms, not with fireworks or fanfare, but with whispers. You begin to notice the way sunlight lands on your skin. You hear lyrics differently. You walk slower. Breathe deeper. You're not in a rush to get anywhere, because you finally arrived in yourself. This is not passivity. It's power. The power of presence, of acting without attachment, of loving without needing, of moving without performing. You become a quiet force, and that force ripples outward, whether or not anyone sees it. Because the field doesn't reward performance. It amplifies presence. Even your relationships begin to shimmer differently. You stop playing roles. Stop trying to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. You release the urge to be the healer, the fixer, the explicable. And in doing so, you make space for sacred connections, relationships that are not built on rescuing or roles, but on resonance. You start recognizing soul echoes in others, conversations that feel like remembering, silences that feel like home. You begin loving not from lack, but from overflow. And in that shift, you become someone else's mirror, to not a savior, but a signal. A reminder that we are all tuning forks, vibrating in proximity to one another, shaping each other not through force, but through frequency. Eventually, even the concept of purpose changes. You stop seeing it as a job title or mission to accomplish. You begin to feel it instead as a state of coherence. When you are tuned, you are purposeful, no matter what you're doing. Whether you're resting, creating, grieving, or laughing, your purpose is not an activity. It's a vibration. It's the way your presence alters the field around you. The way your alignment invites others to align. You don't need to know your 5-year plan to be on path. You only need to know your present frequency. Because when you live from coherence, the future takes care of itself. There will be times when you forget, when doubt clouds the signal, when old stories try to reclaim their territory. That's okay. Forgetting is part of the rhythm too. What matters is how you return, how you respond. Whether you reach for the old script or remember the new resonance. Whether you panic or pause. Coherence doesn't mean constant clarity. It means you know how to come back. Again and again. Gently, intentionally, with breath, with presence. You remember that the most powerful act is not achievement, but attunement. And this is what changes the world. Not protests of noise, but presence. Not mass awakenings led by spectacle, but a million quiet people remembering who they are and living from it. No parade, no performance, just coherence, rippling outward through ordinary lives. The kind of change that doesn't need headlines because it lives in heartlines. The kind of shift that recalibrates a species without force, just by resonance. So tonight, or this morning, or whenever these words reach you, know this. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are precisely on time for your own unfolding. And the discomfort you feel? That's not failure. That's expansion. That's coherence trying to emerge through your confusion. Let it come without needing to explain itself. Let yourself shift, not because the world told you to, but because your inner world is ready to be heard. You are not a seeker anymore. You are a rememberer. And everything you've been searching for has always been inside your vibration, waiting for you to trust its sound. Let this moment be the one where you stop asking for signs and start becoming one. Not loudly, not urgently, just consistently, quietly, truthfully. You are the field, awakening to itself. You are the hum beneath the chaos, the signal beneath the noise. And now that you remember, the real question is no longer, who am I? But am I willing to live as the answer? There comes a moment not marked by thunder or stars, but by a quiet internal softening where something shifts and never quite returns to how it was. A breath feels fuller. A silence feels safer. And you realize you are no longer chasing answers. You're embodying them. Not perfectly, not always, but consistently enough that the terrain beneath you begins to change. The ground of your perception grows gentler. You stop needing closure to heal. You stop needing applause to create. You stop needing control to feel safe. What's left is presence. What's left is enough. And in that enoughness, something ancient opens, an intelligence older than thought, wiser than instruction, more reliable than any system you've ever been asked to trust. This intelligence isn't outside you. It is you. And as you live from it, the separation between the spiritual and the practical dissolves. There's only energy. There's only alignment. There's only the vibration you hold and the echo it creates. You begin noticing what you used to overlook. Not just signs or symbols, but textures. The way your body responds to different spaces. The way time stretches in some conversations and contracts in others. You begin to feel when something is in tune with your becoming and when it's not. And that knowing becomes enough. You no longer require permission or consensus to trust yourself. You don't need a reason that makes sense to others. You simply feel the yes or the no, and you honor it. That's how alignment sounds when it speaks through the body, not in words, but in resonance. And the more you follow it, the more fluent you become. Eventually, you don't just trust the voice, you become it. The doubt that once shadowed every choice falls quiet, not because you silenced it, but because your coherence grew louder. This shift doesn't isolate you. It reintroduces you. To yourself, yes, but also to others. Because when you stop performing your identity, you meet people as you truly are. You no longer attract from fear or fill from lack. You relate from essence. And those who meet you in that space, those who see through the mask because they've removed their own, become part of a different kind of intimacy. An intimacy not built on fixing or fusion, but frequency. Not completing each other, but amplifying each other. Every interaction becomes a note in a larger chord, some brief, some enduring, but all part of the song your life is composing. And the beauty of this song isn't in its perfection, it's in its authenticity. It doesn't need to be understood by everyone. It only needs to be true. Even your relationship with uncertainty begins to shift. You stop fearing the unknown because you've learned the unknown is not the absence of structure. It's the presence of potential. It's the field, undistorted by expectation, waiting to crystallize around the vibration you bring to it. So, you stop needing to plan every step. You stop mapping every outcome. Instead, you hold the frequency of what feels true and let reality catch up. This doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become precise. You act when aligned. You rest when required. You don't move to prove. You move to express. And expression, when sourced from coherence, creates momentum that control never could. This is where magic begins to feel ordinary, not because it loses wonder, but because it becomes constant. You say things you don't remember planning, and they land in the exact way someone needed. You walk into rooms and feel the energy before the words. You stop looking for signs because your life becomes one. Not in grand gestures, but in subtle ones. The delayed flight that introduced you to someone who would shift your path. The book that fell off a shelf at the exact right page. The memory that returned just as you needed its lesson. These aren't accidents, they're responses. You are participating in a responsive reality. And the more coherent your presence, the more precise the response becomes. But even in coherence, you're still human. You'll still grieve, still doubt, still forget. And that's not a failure. It's part of the frequency. Emotions don't make you less aligned. Denying them does. You don't need to bypass your pain to stay tuned. You need to feel it fully without drowning in it. To let it pass through you without turning it into identity. That's emotional intelligence at the vibrational level, not managing how you feel to stay in control, but allowing how you feel to guide you toward alignment. Even sorrow has a signal. Even anger carries data. The key is not to silence your emotion, but to listen with coherence. To ask, what is this revealing about where I am vibrating? And to respond with compassion rather than correction. Because coherence is not a final state, it's a dynamic rhythm, a dance, a rebalancing. And just like nature, you'll have seasons. Days where you feel deeply aligned and radiant. Days where the old noise creeps back in. But the more you practice presence, the less you fear the fluctuations. You don't panic when it's winter, because you trust the spring will come. You don't resist the pruning, because you know the blossom is encoded in the root. And that, knowing that internal rhythm, is what begins to guide you more than goals ever could. You move not because you're behind, but because you're called. You rest not because you've earned it, but because your field needs to integrate. Here's something you may not have noticed yet. Your remembering has already begun to affect others. Not because you're trying to fix them, but because coherence is contagious. Your stillness gives others permission to stop performing. Your presence helps others hear their own intuition more clearly. You become a tuning fork, not through preaching, but through being. And in doing so, you create a field around you, one of clarity, softness, integrity. A field that shifts the behavior of spaces without needing to dominate them. You don't demand change. You emanate it. And that's why this work is sacred, not because it's loud, but because it's living. Eventually, you stop needing to be seen to know you exist. You stop needing applause to feel valid. You stop needing external proof to trust internal wisdom. You just live. And your life becomes the answer to questions others haven't even asked. Yet, not in arrogance, in quiet certainty. A certainty not of facts, but of frequency. You no longer outsource your knowing. You no longer apologize for your clarity. You no longer dull your light to be digestible. You become fully, freely, and gently what you always were before the forgetting began. And the forgetting? It served you too. It made you human. It gave you contrast. It allowed you to know what dissonance feels like so that you could recognize harmony when it returned. The fall was part of the music. The ache was part of the attuning. And the fact that you're still here, still listening, still willing, that is the miracle. That is the invitation. That is the signal the field has been waiting for. You are not chasing transformation. You are remembering resonance. And as you do, the field rearranges. Not all at once, not for show, but deeply, quietly, consistently. The world may not notice right away, but you will. And that's enough. You are not becoming. You are arriving dot as you continue to live from coherence. Something deeper than belief begins to settle in your bones, a quiet, cellular remembering that bypasses thought altogether. It's not about convincing yourself anymore. It's about becoming the kind of presence that no longer needs to be convinced. This is not confidence. It's clarity. A clarity that doesn't shout, but emanates. A knowing that doesn't argue, but stands. And from this state, the noise of the world no longer destabilizes you. It may still move through you, but it doesn't define you. You observe more than you react. You listen more than you explain. And when you do speak, your words carry the density of truth, not because they're clever or rehearsed, but because they come from alignment. And alignment always resonates. It doesn't need to dominate to be felt. There's a new texture to your movement too. You stop rushing, not because you're lazy, but because urgency no longer feels like power. It feels like interference. You begin honoring divine pacing, not as delay, but as design. You understand that some realities need time to root before they can rise. That some relationships need space to remember their purpose. That some callings need stillness before they become clear. So you slow down, not in resistance, but in reverence. You become available to timing instead of demanding it. And in that, openness, synchronicity becomes more frequent, not as coincidence, but as confirmation. The dream shows up when you stop chasing it. The person arrives when you no longer need their arrival to feel whole. The opportunity emerges not because you forced it, but because you became the version of yourself that could hold it. This is when your inner and outer worlds begin to speak the same language. You think a thought, and someone echoes it hours later. You dream of a place, and someone invites you there. You shift a belief, and the next day something unexplainable confirms it. It's not superstition, it's coherence showing itself in form. When your vibration aligns with your essence, the field stops sending mixed messages. Your reality stops being confusing because your internal state is no longer chaotic. And in that peace, even the challenges that arise feel different. You don't see them as punishments, but as precise mirrors. Every trigger becomes an invitation. Every discomfort becomes data. You become a student of your own vibration, not in obsession, but in artistry. You're not fixing yourself. You're fine-tuning your signal dot. It's also here that you begin. Releasing identities you thought were permanent. The healer, the achiever, the people pleaser, the rebel, the loner, the overthinker. Each one a layer you once needed for safety, for belonging, for survival. But now, you no longer need to be needed. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You no longer measure your worth in usefulness. You simply are. And that being becomes your greatest gift. Not because it solves everything, but because it reveals that nothing was ever truly missing. You weren't waiting to be whole. You were waiting to stop hiding. And when the hiding ends, life flows not because everything outside you has changed, but because everything inside you is no longer split docked. So what now? You keep tuning, not to chase a goal, but to stay in relationship with your own becoming. You live not for certainty, but for curiosity. You trust not because it always feels good, but because trust is the bridge between vibration and form. You create not to be seen, but because your presence wants to express. And in that rhythm, you rediscover magic, not as something rare, but as something natural. You see it in children's laughter, in the way leaves know when to fall, in the way your own body heals itself while you sleep. And this is perhaps the greatest remembering of all, that you are never separate from the sacred. You are simply taught to forget where to look. The sacred isn't in temples or texts, in attention, in the way you witness a stranger with compassion, in the way you choose rest over hustle, in the way you forgive even when no one asked you to, in the way you sit in silence and feel full. You stop needing rituals to feel spiritual because your life becomes the ritual. Your breath becomes prayer. Your presence becomes medicine. And this is not a performance, it's a homecoming, a soft return to the original you, the one who knew long before knowing was language. There will still be days when you forget, when the static returns, when your mind spirals and your heart clenches and the old identities knock on the door. Let them, but don't move back in. Let the thoughts pass through like weather. Let the doubt speak, then dissolve. Let the fear tremble, then fade. You are not here to eliminate your humanity. You're here to embody it fully, fearlessly, freely. That's the true coherence. Not erasing your shadow, but dancing with it without letting it lead dot. Because in the end, this whole path is not about escaping anything. It's about integrating everything. The divine and the mundane, the shadow and the light, the memory and the mystery. You hold it all. And that holding, without grasping, without resisting, is the frequency the world needs most. Not experts, not masters, but embodied humans, soft-spoken warriors of presence. Ordinary mystics walking through grocery stores and family dinners and heartbreaks and deadlines with a frequency so clear, it makes others remember theirs. You become a lighthouse, not by speaking louder, but by simply staying lit. So if you're wondering what's next, it's this. Continue. Don't rush. Don't strive. Don't compare your journey to others' milestones. Trust the rhythm of your own emergence. Tend to your coherence like a sacred fire. Adjust the dials when life gets noisy. Return to your signal when fear gets loud. And know that every time you choose alignment over approval, sensation over strategy, embodiment over escape, you shift something real. Not just in your own life, but in the field we all share. You may never fully see the ripples you create. You may never know how your silent healing changed someone else's timing, but it does. It always does. Because energy is never wasted. Frequency is never ignored. And presence, true, rooted, coherent presence echoes far beyond the moment. It's lived. It becomes memory in the earth. Harmony in a stranger. Guidance in someone else's night sky. You are part of that. Not because you try to be, but because you are. And now, the spiral continues, not in circles, but in deepening layers. You're not back where you started. You're returning from a higher octave. And this return is the mark of someone who no longer seeks to escape the world, but to resonate within it. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are choosing. And that choice, made again and again in softness, is how the new world begins. The longer you live from this resonance, the more you begin to understand that reality is not something waiting outside your door. It is something blooming from within. You, the future is not arriving, it's remembering. It's folding itself inward toward the you who finally stopped chasing and started listening. And in this subtle unfolding, you begin to witness something extraordinary. The world responds in rhythm, not just to your actions, but to your awareness. Not as myth, not as metaphor, but as the mechanics of the unseen, moving with precision according to your state of being. The questions shift. Not, what should I do? But what am I broadcasting? Not, how do I fix this? But, what frequency is this moment asking me to hold? You stop waiting for signs because you understand. You are the sign. You are the message. And every time you show up from that knowing, the field rearranges to match it, not because you commanded it, but because you remembered it. This remembering does not make life effortless, but it makes it readable. You begin to interpret the energies behind the events. You notice the subtle ways your body closes in the presence of dishonesty and opens in the presence of integrity. You start sensing when a door closes not as rejection, but as redirection. You pause before reacting, not because you've become passive, but because you've become perceptive. Awareness replaces urgency. Wisdom replaces instinct. You move, slower, but with more certainty. And in that slowness, things accelerate not in speed, but in depth. The outcomes may take time, but the alignments are immediate. You begin to recognize the feedback not in results, but in resonance. When something is for you, it fits, not always comfortably but clearly. It doesn't need to be forced. It finds you. And when something is no longer for you, it fades not as punishment, but as precision. The field does not punish. It harmonizes. You also begin to notice the ways you once abandoned yourself, not as shame, but as pattern. All the times you stayed silent to keep the peace. All the moments you ignored your gut to maintain the illusion. All the choices made from fear of being left instead of love for your truth. These are not failures. They are bookmarks. Proof of how far you've come. And as you revisit them, not to dwell, but to understand, you begin re-anchoring the self you once had to fracture to survive. You no longer feel the need to apologize for your needs. You no longer shrink around those who cannot hold your wholeness. You no longer ask for permission to live at your frequency, not out of rebellion, but out of rhythm. You've learned that coherence is not loud, but it is unshakable. The world begins to feel different too, not because it has changed, but because you are no longer meeting it with static. The chaos of the collective no longer pulls you into its current. You can feel it, acknowledge it, respond with compassion, but not drown in it. You carry an anchor now, not to the past, not to control, but to presence, a quiet, undramatic groundedness, the kind that holds during storms, a kind that others feel without needing explanation. You are not immune to the world's suffering, but you are no longer fueled by it. Your empathy has grown roots. It does not spill everywhere. It moves through you like a current, guided by coherence, not codependency. You begin to serve from overflow, not depletion. And in doing so, your service becomes sacred not in its volume, but in its vibration. You realize, slowly and beautifully, that your very presence is enough to shift a room, not your voice, not your resume, not your plans, just your being. When you walk in with coherence, the field notices. People feel safer. Clarity increases. Resistance softens. This isn't magic. This is resonance. And this is what the world has been starving for. Not more noise, not more solutions, but more presence. Aligned, embodied, attuned presence. The kind that doesn't demand attention, but holds it naturally. The kind that doesn't rescue others, but reminds them of their own rhythm. The kind that walks through both light and shadow without losing signal. And eventually, your life itself becomes the teacher. You don't need to explain what you've learned. You just live it. You don't evangelize transformation. You embody it, and that embodiment speaks in a language beyond words. A language the body understands. A frequency the heart recognizes. A signal the soul has been waiting for. People start asking you different questions. Not, how did you do it? But why do I feel calm around you? Not, what's your strategy? But how did you learn to trust yourself like this? And your answer won't come from steps or systems. It will come from stillness, from softness, from having walked through the forgetting and chosen, again and again, to remember. This is the revolution. Not loud, not viral, not even visible most of the time, but real. And real moves differently. It doesn't need to convince. It doesn't need to perform. It just is. And that being ripples further than any broadcast could reach. You become part of a new field, not of followers, but of frequencies. A quiet grid of coherence across the world, lighting up in living rooms, and cafes and forests and offices and art studios. People remembering who they are, not all at once, not identically, but deeply, irreversibly. You are one of them. You are one of us. And so you continue. Not because you're broken, not because you're behind, but because this is what it means to evolve not upward, but inward. Not toward perfection, but toward wholeness. Not away from the world, but more deeply into it. This is what the ancients pointed to when they spoke of sacred cycles, of inner temples, of the voice beneath the voice. They weren't speaking in riddles. They were describing this moment, this unfolding, this becoming God, because in the end, you were never meant to escape your life. You were meant to remember how to shape it, not with force, not with fear, but with frequency. And now that you have, the question is no longer, when will things change? The question is, how will I choose to resonate today? And so we arrive not at the end, but at a soft return. A return to the hum beneath your story, the quiet intelligence that has always been with you, waiting for you to listen not harder, but gentler. If you close your eyes now, you may feel it, the subtle shift in your breath, the loosening of something unnamed, the faint but steady signal of presence reclaiming its space. Nothing needs to be solved right now. Nothing needs to be chased. You are allowed to rest inside your own frequency. Let this be the night you stop trying to become and simply let yourself be. Let this be the morning you walk with less noise and more knowing. The path is still unfolding, yes, but so are you. And the field you've been seeking? It's been tuning itself around you all along. Subscribe to our channel so we can meet again next time. Other stories are also waiting for you. Whispers across the quiet, each one a mirror, each one remembering. Until then, hold the signal. You are not alone. You are in rhythm.